How's it going, my bakers? Welcome to the channel. This episode is for the ones who really like their sourdough bread to be sour, so let's go to the kitchen and have a closer look at it. This hearty sandwich bread packs a punch of flavor. It's made with 50% whole wheat flour and a Saoker containing millet, cornmeal, oats and fennel seed. It's fermented at room temperature for around 15 hours. The resulting bread has a nice sour flavor. It is soft while also being nice and chewy at the same time. And it'll go perfectly with any toppings you like. Plus it's super easy to make, so there's no reason not to. So let's get right to it and see what we need. Equipment wise, we only need the bowl, scales, a dough scraper, temperature probe and a loaf tin. Nothing special here. As for the ingredients, we need some white bread flour, whole wheat flour, some water, a sourdough starter, and this time I'm not making 11. This starter is ready to go. And it's 9 PM right now, so I don't have time to wait for 11. So just a little bit of this will make our dough rise wonderfully. We'll also need some salt, and then for the Saoker, we use some oats, cornmeal, ground fennel seeds and millet. You can use any grains and seeds that you like, it's totally up to you, but I think this combination works really well. And we'll also need some boiling water for soaking the grains and seeds. If you want to learn more about Saokers, I made a full separate video about them. You can find it in the Principles of Baking playlist. A Saoker is a great way of softening the grains and seeds that you use in the recipe. And the options for grains and seeds that you use are practically limitless. Some Saokers use hot water, some Saokers use cold water. The millet is quite hard, so that's why we're using boiling water here. We'll mix all this up and then leave it to soak for around 1 hour. It would take only half an hour to soak properly, but we'll leave it for 1 hour so it cools down to room temperature so our dough doesn't get too warm. As you can see, it has soaked up all the water, and this water makes up part of the hydration of the recipe. For the main dough, I'm going to be using slightly warmer water than normally. This is because my kitchen is quite cool, and this dough will not receive a lot of kneading, so it's not going to warm up that much. But more on temperature control in the Principles of Baking playlist. Now we can add the rest of the ingredients to this recipe. Starting with the water, then follow that with your sourdough starter. My starter is in a perfect condition right now. I would be feeding it at this point. If yours is a little bit overripe, it's totally fine. Because the dough is going to take the whole night to ferment, it's going to rise anyway. This is an easy hands-off method. We just mix the dough in the evening, go to bed, it's ready by the next day. Once you add the salt, make sure to mix until it's dissolved, and then follow that with white flour and whole wheat flour. Now grab your scraper and mix it until there's no more dry flour left, and then tip it out on the table. This dough will be very sticky and messy, and if you want to make your life a little bit easier, you can let this sit for around 20 minutes before you start kneading it. I didn't have that much time, I was gonna go to bed in a minute, but regardless of what you do, you should give it 4 minutes of slap and folds. Pick the dough up by one side, stretch it against the table towards yourself and fold it over forwards. And repeat. We're not really trying to develop a lot of gluten here. This is mostly for distributing the ingredients nice and evenly. By the way, do you call it stretch and folds or slap and folds? Let me know down in the comments. Okay, so it's been 4 minutes, the dough is still sticky, but it's nice and cohesive and there is some gluten strength. Whenever you're handling dough like this, wet your hands with water to prevent them from sticking. Now we can place this dough into a bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius, just about right for this. My kitchen is around 23 degrees at the moment. You can find all the imperial measurements in the written recipe. Now let's cover this up and let it ferment for around 10 to 12 hours. And look at that, it's rising beautifully. We only used a little bit of sourdough starter. So it's the next morning now, we can pre-shape this dough. It is very loose and stretchy because it was sitting for so long. There is no tension in this dough, but that's totally fine. The pre-shaping step will give it a little bit of strength. Dust it with flour quite generously, then using your scraper release it from the bowl and pop it out on the table with the smooth side down. Be sure to dust your hands with flour to prevent them from sticking to the dough. Stretch the dough out to a big rectangle, then fold the bottom third up, then cross the two sides over in the middle, then grab the top and fold it down. Finally you can flip it upside down and then round it off and tighten it against the table using your scraper. It will be loose and it will be sticky, but it's not too bad. Once you've shaped it up, cover it and leave it to rest for around 20 minutes. After resting, we can do the final shaping. Dust the dough with flour generously, then release it from the table using your scraper and flip it upside down. Keep your hands dusted with flour to make it easier. Stretch the dough out to a rectangle shape, then cross the two sides over in the middle. And now roll it up, starting from the top. Grab the dough, pull it down and push it forwards. Whenever you are handling dough like this, remember to use a light touch and quick hands. That way the dough will not get stuck to your hands. And of course a little bit of flour goes a long way too. Using your dough scraper, straighten it out and tighten it up a little bit. Now we can place this loaf into a tin. This is a 2 pound or 900 gram tin, but it will fit in a 1.5 pound tin too. While it's cleaned down, I'll leave it for the final proof. Final proofing time will depend on the temperature of your kitchen and the state of your starter as well, but 2 to 3 hours should do it. You will let the dough rise until it just starts peaking above the rim of the tin, and if your cling film seems a bit tight and you think that your dough may get stuck to it, well then lift it off a little bit. During the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven, 210 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 410 Fahrenheit, and this is puffed up beautifully. If you have a spray bottle with water, then use it. It's good to moisten the surface. It'll make the crust nice and crispy, but if you don't have one, that's totally fine. Now we can pop this bad boy in the oven. It'll take around 40 minutes. If you are ever unsure of the doneness of your loaf, you can take its temperature. If it reads above 94 degrees Celsius or 200 Fahrenheit in the middle, it's ready. If the sides of it are not baked properly, you can take it out of the tin and place it back in the oven for another 5 minutes. After all my years of baking, I just realized this today. The dough scraper is the perfect tool for releasing the dough from the tin. It is very thin so it fits inside, and it's also plastic so it doesn't ruin the coating. Now this loaf was not stuck. I was just excited to show you my discovery, which I'm sure all of you knew a long time ago. Anyhow, that's how you make a super slow fermented sourdough loaf with a millet soaker. This is definitely for the people who like their sourdough bread to be sour. The long fermentation gives it a very intense flavor, but at the same time the millet, the oats, the cornmeal and the fennel seed give it a bit of a sweetness. And the texture of the crumb is so sturdy. You should definitely slice it a lot thinner than I did, but it's all good. So what do you think of this recipe? Do you use soakers in baking? What's your favorite grains and seeds to use in a soaker? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click right here. Subscribe to the channel, click over here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.